The principle of pattern. What is a pattern? It is basically the repetition of one or more elements of art. And in the elements of art, what we're talking about are line, shape, form, value, texture, space. So any of those could be repeated, and that becomes a pattern. A motif, that is the single unit that is repeated to make the pattern. So down below, you see the sample of the motif. The motif itself is this little flower pattern, and then it becomes this larger pattern once it has been enlarged and repeated. This is what makes the pattern. There are different kinds of patterns where motifs are repeated. You can repeat a motif in rows. That's achieved by repeating it over and over again in columns, either vertically or rows horizontally. These images here show you some great examples. The little people standing in different rows and columns evenly spaced apart. The photograph near the top here shows a wonderful image of bottles lined up. I think they're like empty wine bottles or maybe Coke bottles, I'm not sure. The famous painting or lithograph reproduction of printmaking by Andy Warhol in the 1960s and 70s was Coca-Cola bottles repeated over and over again. This is a wallpaper pattern on the left, and you can see how all of the little white hatch lines are in different columns going up and down individually. The lipstick pattern here from the stock photo shows things going horizontally in rows, repeating it over and over and over again, same pattern of colors. Another format is by gridding, and the grid, the most simple one that we could probably think of is the chessboard or the checkerboard, made up of your alternating squares. But any kind of a grid, whether it's a narrow grid, like this wire caging down here, or something more rectangular. Here's a whole bunch of credit cards coming off of a line. And all of those cards repeat over and over again in a grid-like fashion. Even down here, when we start thinking of things like tile, tiles on the floor are repeated over and over again. This is a great picture of an outdoor cinder blocks, decorative blocks, have been laid down side by side in a grid pattern. Mickey Mouse in a grid pattern. Radial is another option, and we know radial is something circular, and it's basically your motif would be branching out from some kind of a central axis at sort of regular intervals. Nothing is more radial than nature. Flowers, blossoms. We also think of cars. Us teenagers and hip drivers are always looking for new hubcaps that have really unique or interesting patterns. Well, they tend to be radial in their likeness. They spiral out a repeating pattern from the central location in the middle. All right. Mandalas that are created are radial designs and patterns. Borders and bands are another form of repetition with motifs. These tend to be more linear. The world of wallpaper borders was big in the 1990s, but will often appear in forms of tiling on backsplashes, bathrooms, floors, as decorative accents to other tiled or vinyled areas. This over here are some Greek motifs of repetition you would find in Greece during ancient times. You'll see it on urns and on artwork and even in the fabrics that they wore. Again, more tiling examples. Where do you place your motif? One of the styles of placement is called the half drop. And that's basically, imagine a grid, but another word for it would be staggered. The little icon here with the letter P standing for pattern here, this is a row of the letter P, but this row here is offset or staggered. The objects in this row are dropped by the half of the measurement of the first row. Looky there. So where this P and that P come together, this one fits right in the middle. It's staggered. Okay, this wallpaper pattern here, you can sell whatever they are, lollipops, dandelions, I'm not sure, but how this starts at about the halfway point of the previous row. Some more examples of this. This is a crazy one here, where the eyeglasses of the crazy woman and with the crazy hair, I guess, is lined up with each other, and then the glasses and the face have dropped by half. All right, pattern dropped by half. This fits in between those. A great idea example here, this is a digital one, is imagining your objects are sitting inside of a square, and then divide that square up into half, and that should sit at the halfway point. Teddy bears broken in half. A rotating motif starts to get a little complicated now. It's taking your motif and you start with it in a normal face-up position if it has a direction, and then the next time you turn it a quarter, turn it again a quarter, etc., 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 etc. Okay, so it's taking it and rotating it. Tessellations in math, because you're dealing with triangles a lot of times, are often rotated in this kind of fashion. How this triangle here is then rotated here, and see how it kind of doubles up, and then it rotates to here and to here and to here and to here. So tessellations are one way that a lot of times things are rotated in the motif. Tiling, different kinds of vinyl tile. If you look down on the floor in the art studio or in any room at St. X, the tile floors are slightly turned. And some might be turned all the way around in this rotation fashion. Follow these arrows here. This is the same tile as it is here, here, and here. It has just been turned by a quarter each time to create this pattern. You could alternate it and do something different, but by rotating it, it created these off white and black, white and black, white and black patterns. This is an actual linoleum print. It was created on linoleum, like we are going to be working on, where they scratched into the linoleum, and then they inked up the plate, and they printed it, and then they rotated it, and they rotated it, and they rotated it on a central axis. So as they went around the paper and printed, all right, the pattern rotated. Progressive staggered. This means that you're going to work with at least 3 different motifs. You start with the first motif, A, then B motif, then C motif. And then the next time in the next row, you might stagger. Shift everything down by 1 and you start with B. And then you take the C pattern and then you go back to the A pattern. And then in the third row, you start with the C and you go to the A and then you go to the B. So you progressively stagger the placements. Alternating motifs are probably the most common you see. especially on the floors in St. X in the hallway where you have the row of green, the row of white, the row of green, and alternate down the second floor hallways. This is two alternating motifs, A versus B, A versus B, A versus B. This is your checkerboard, okay? But this could be alternating colors or alternating motifs on this ancient 1960s looking Corelle ware dish. It goes from a solid background of gold to white, and alternates. Again, it doesn't have to be the same pattern. It can alternate between two different patterns or turn them and be two different colors.